Optimism. It is the hopefulness and confidence about the future or the successful outcome of something. Marcus's optimism may be driven by a belief in the potential for the Philippines to leverage its natural resources, geographic location, and growing population to become a more dynamic and prosperous economy. However, it is important to consider potential challenges such as the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, inflation, and the geopolitical tensions that could impact economic growth. Blind optimism involve optimistic biases that affect self-deception or convincing oneself of desired beliefs without reality checks. Blind optimism can lead to underestimating risk, overestimating abilities, and inadequate preparation. Marcus's overconfidence can lead the government to overlook potential risks or challenges which can ultimately undermine economic development and stability. Therefore, it is important for the government to maintain a balance between optimism and realism, taking into account both opportunities and risk, and ensuring that policies are evidence-based and grounded in a comprehensive understanding of economic and social trends. This requires a commitment to transparency, accountability, and ongoing evaluation and adjustment of policies in response to changing circumstances. Where do we stand? Easy, the Philippines. The video and article discusses the economic plan of President Bongbong Marcos. Marcos aims to achieve a 7% economic growth rate for the Philippines by around 2023, which he claims can be achieved through a combination of government spending, private sector investments, and support for the agricultural sector. Marcos argues that increasing economic growth is essential for creating jobs, reducing poverty, and improving the standard of living for Filipinos. He also emphasizes the importance of improving infrastructure and attracting foreign investments as key drivers of economic growth. The video notes that while Marcos's economic plan has received some support from business groups, some experts are skeptical of his ability to achieve such ambitious growth targets given the challenges facing the Philippine economy, including the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, high levels of inequality, and political instability. Balance. An even distribution of weight enabling someone or something to remain uptight and steady. To balance out and uprightly judge and analyze the situation and its given statement, we need to determine its pros and cons. Investment opportunities are one of them. President Marcos has highlighted various investment opportunities in renewable energy, agro-processing, transportation, and infrastructure development, which can attract more investments and create more job opportunities. Marcos has also emphasized the importance of strengthening the agricultural sector, which is critical for food security and rural development. A notable one is free trade agreements. Marcos has stressed the importance of the country's network to FTAs to maximize opportunities, which can help the country to expand its trade and investment relationships with other countries. On the other side of the coin, Marcos's projection of a 7% economic growth rate in 2023 is higher than an IMF's projection of 2.7%, which could be perceived as unrealistic by some economists. While Marcos emphasizes the country's strong macroeconomic fundamentals, some critics may argue that not all sectors of the society have benefited equally from the country's economic growth, and there are still significant inequalities in the country. Based on this video alone, this will not give justice enough since it's only brief, but it would be blind to not point out the lack of specific details. Marcos' statements lack specific details on how his administration plans to achieve the desired economic growth rate and how it will address some critical issues facing the country, such as poverty, inequality, and corruption. As a social studies major student, Bongbong Marcos' statement touches on several economic concepts that are important in social studies. Specifically, macroeconomics, including national accounts, business cycles, inflation, unemployment, and fiscal policy. National accounts are used to measure the economic activity of a country, including its gross domestic product or GDP. In his statement, President Bongbong Marcos mentions the IMF projection for global economic growth in 2023, as well as the Philippines' projected GDP growth rate of 7%. This shows that national accounts are an important tool for the government or policymakers to understand the state of the economy and make informed decisions. The business cycle refers to the fluctuations in economic activity that occur over time, including periods of expansion and contraction. Bongbong Marcos notes that the global economy is expected to experience slower growth in 2023 compared to previous years, which suggests that we may be entering a period of economic contraction. However, he also mentions that the Philippines' strong macroeconomic fundamentals and fiscal discipline have enabled it to withstand any negative shocks and continue growing. Inflation refers to the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising. President Bongbong Marcos notes that there are elevated inflationary pressures in the Philippines, which can have a negative impact on the most affected and vulnerable sectors of society. He emphasizes the need for sufficient welfare measures to cushion this impact. Unemployment refers to the number of people who are actively seeking employment but unable to find it. President Bongbong Marcos does not mention unemployment specifically in his statement, but it is an important factor to consider when discussing the state of the economy and the effectiveness of government policies. Fiscal policy refers to the use of government spending and taxation to influence the economy. Bongbong Marcos notes that the Philippine government has implemented structural reforms and liberalization of key sectors, as well as public-private partnerships to support economic growth. He also mentions the government measures to improve local food production and strengthen the agricultural sector, which can be seen as examples of fiscal policy in action. As me. While Marcos's statement is optimistic about the country's economic growth, it is still important to consider various factors that can impact economic growth, such as global headwinds, domestic policies, and external factors. It is also important to examine the government's track record in achieving economic growth targets and whether their policies and initiatives are sustainable in the long run. Social studies students like me should evaluate the validity of economic projections and forecasts and understand how they are formulated. This involves analyzing various data sources, economic indicators, and assumptions used in the projections. It is also important to examine the potential impact of economic growth on different sectors of society, including vulnerable and marginalized groups. As a social studies major student, it is important to evaluate the government's economic plans and projections critically and examine various factors that can impact economic growth. This involves a rigorous analysis of data sources, economic indicators, and assumptions used in the projections, as well as an understanding of the potential impact of economic growth on different sectors of society. My name is Josh Richardson M. Malabosa, and I am from BSS Social Studies 1-1, and this is my reaction and analysis of President Bongbong Marcos's statement in the specific video about the Philippines' economic growth. I hope you learned something from my insights and opinions.
A reaction video is a video in which people react to something. In this context, we need to react in certain matters like this in pure professionalism and with critical analysis, since what we're talking about is not just some simple issue, it's our future.